now we're going to apply solving quadratics with trig functions or trig equations. So if it helps, you could think of this as x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. So really off to the side I could say sine of x was going to be replaced with x. That's kind of for my own purposes. Then we're going to factor it because we have to solve this quadratic. So x and x plus and minus. Then we have to multiply to 2, add to negative 1. So then we would say x equals negative 1 and 2. But really that was sine of x because remember x is sine of x. So if I go back and I want to go from the very beginning, I could factor this to sine of x plus 1, sine of x minus 2 equals 0. Then I have to solve. So sine of x plus 1 equals 0, sine of x minus 2 equals 0. And then we just have to find x. So we would subtract 1. Where does sine equal negative 1? And remember, this is being restricted because it's the same thing as inverse sine of negative 1 equals x. So if we wanted to solve this, we would just find the angle where sine is negative 1. Well, think in unit circle. Sine are the y, so it's going to fall right here. Because it's got my restriction, it's got to be the negative pi over 2. And then this guy right here is going to become sine of x equals 2. Well, it's asking where is sine 2? Sine can never be greater than 1, so we only have one solution. And then this guy right here, we have to figure out how am I going to solve this quadratic? Well, if it was 2x squared plus radical 3x equals 0, I could basically say cosine of x is going to be my x. I'm replacing that. That's what I'm doing. I'm not going to factor it with we could do two sets, but the easiest thing to look for is to say, is there a greatest common factor? Yeah, I could factor x out of both. That's going to leave 2x plus radical 3 equals 0. At this stage, I would substitute back in my cosine. So instead of x, I'm going to say cosine of x. 2 times cosine of x plus radical 3 equals 0. So then you just have everything factored for you without even having to factor it with trig. Let me slide this up a little bit. Then your final answer comes from when you actually set each factor equal to 0, 2 cosine of x plus radical 3 equals 0, and solve. So this says find the angle where cosine is 0. Well, remember cosine is first and second quadrant, so he's going to fall at that 90 or pi over 2. So there's one answer. And then this is asking where is cosine of x equal to negative radical 3 over 2, because I would subtract then divide, just solving that, because at this point we just have two linear equations, which you did yesterday. Cosine has to come from first or second, its negative has to come from my second quadrant, and then we're going to find that angle right there. Well, it's going to be 5 pi over 6. And those are your two solutions. So you may have one, you may have two, you may have none. It's a quadratic. Those are your options as far as number of solutions that you may possibly have.